Well, I was going to begin by welcoming Marcus back, the
Okay.
only person who has been re-invited back to this podcast. Do you feel honored, Marcus?
Actually, I do like a lot. I
Mhm.
love this podcast, and so to be invited back a number of times is really special to me. So thank you so much.
Mhm. You're so
We love
welcome.
Marcus.
We
Oh,
we did an in-person event with Marcus for any of our listeners who aren't aware, so
that was super fun.
it was good fun. Let's do it again. I know since you last came on the podcast, you have been on a bit of a journey down the neurodivergence
Mm,
exploration route, understanding of oneself. And this is a topic that's just coming up more and more, with more people identifying neurodivergent traits within themselves, trying to understand themselves and whether the lens of neurodivergence makes sense as a lens to look through when we're trying to understand, particularly, I guess, our relationship with food and body. And just before we started recording, you started telling us that actually where you were in this process of understanding, I guess, understanding your processes and yourself. So if you're happy to pick up with where we rudely interrupted you to hit the record button,
for
please do.
sure. It's just a really scary and vulnerable process for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons being exactly what you said. Neurodivergence is becoming better understood. The implication of that being more people are being diagnosed, more people are coming out and saying neurodivergent, and the unhappy consequence of that is that there are a lot of people criticizing, so, oh, it's so fashionable to be neurodivergent now, like everyone's neurodivergent now, everyone has ADHD right now, and there's this whole narrative that's pushed by a few really unhelpful people about how, oh, neurodivergence is not an excuse for this or that or whatever. And it feels really precarious and really vulnerable and really scary for me to have my attention drawn to a few things by my doctor and to be really honest about what it is that I'm experiencing, how I've lived my entire life, the way I think, the way I feel, the way I navigate different things, and to have someone say, I think you need to go through an autism diagnosis process. And the further I get through this process, the more I'm ticking yes boxes, on all these questions, all these things that I'm being asked to explain and talk about my experience with. It's like every single question on these questionnaires, as I go further and further through this process, makes me feel like really seen. So I'm like, no one's ever asked me that before. And now that you mention it, yes, that's exactly how I think. That's exactly how I feel.
Could you give us a couple of
Yeah.
examples of, like, especially the ones perhaps that have hit home, if that feels okay to talk about?
Yeah. So, um, things that seem really obvious to neurotypical people don't come naturally to me. Like, I think about things in a very literal, almost mathematical way. So, I've always struggled with things like sarcasm. I've always struggled with people not saying exactly what they mean. And it's not like that is the entirety of my experience. And it's not like I can't navigate those situations. But for example, if a friend says, I'm fine, but their tone is kind of clearly irritated, a neurotypical person will often very intuitively kind of pick up on the mismatch between the tone and the words and think, oh, they're not fine. I should check in and or maybe give them space. The autistic response to that is to kind of go, they said they're fine, but their tone was different. Does that mean they're not fine? Are they expecting me to like ask again? Do they want space? What if I push too hard? What's the right move here? Like you run through all these options like you're kind of solving a logic puzzle. And even then, you might misread the situation. And the difficult thing is that that's not unique to autism. Like a lot of people with anxiety might go through a similar kind of process and overthink things, but the combination of different experiences and quote symptoms that I have all together very much angled towards like this is ASD. And I've had doctors my whole life, doctors and therapists, talk to me about anxiety, talk to me about depression. I've had a lot of people essentially try and diagnose me with like anxiety or depression at different times. But especially with a kind of professional understanding of those things, I'm like, but that's not that's not what's really happening. Like that doesn't fit. That doesn't describe my experience consistently.
Mm.
When I look at the experience of autism, that consistently describes what I experience. And a huge obstacle to clarity with that was having this Hollywood version of autism like stuck in my head, like The Good Doctor, for example, like that TV show, like, and to think that autistic people are these human calculators that can't relate to people at all and speak in this really monotone type way and whatever. So yeah, it's 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 a bit of a journey, and this is the first
Mhm.
time I've mentioned it outside of my home because I've been too afraid to mention it on my own podcast because I don't want people to say, oh, here he goes. He's
Yeah.
just getting on the neurodivergent train, like whatever. Yeah, because it feels like a really vulnerable thing to try and find out more about.
Mm.
I think you just did a really good job of explaining that conflict and like in a way that really landed for me to hear like you processing that and the vulnerability next to the maybe relief of being seen, but also where, and so if there was a part of me that was asking, where's the vulnerability then? Because it's almost like, oh, yes, this explains it. This is helping me feel seen. Vulnerability, though, is in the way that the masses interpret this being like part of trend. And that's an interesting layer that is, I think, new in the world right now, right? Like I'm sure there's vulnerability of having a diagnosis in general anyway, or even in being seen and being like, oh my gosh, like this is really landing. There's something very like I have to reorganize my brain around this. But also now that we've got critique in the culture around like you're just jumping on some kind of bandwagon, I'm also curious about what is that difference between what you're describing as like these symptoms might match up with anxiety, but to you you're like I can hear the clarity where you're like it's not just that, there's something else to it. What is that something else? How does a person differentiate between anxiety and ASD?
The anxiety is something I'm experiencing in response to a deeper thing.
Okay.
So it's not like I'm just walking around with anxiety for, no discernible reason. The anxiety comes from me trying to figure out the rules, me trying to figure out what's required of me with a very literal and intellectual understanding of things like social dynamics without any semblance of an intuitive understanding
Mm.
of those things. Like, again, I'm really afraid to talk about this because I don't, for so many reasons, but it's, I adjust the way that I show up in different situations based on what I'm observing in the other people in those situations because I'm looking to them for a kind of formula for what is and isn't correct in this situation. Like in my marriage, for example, I run into a lot of challenges because I'm often looking at my wife as a kind of measuring stick for what is appropriate in different interactions, in different situations. Like, I'll look at different conflicts that can come up in marriage, like different conversations and that kind of thing. And I'll look at the way my wife handles it. And then a part of my mind will go, okay, that, that's acceptable in this situation. That's how we handled it in this situation. And my memory is just crazy with this stuff. I didn't realize that not everyone thought this way. But for example, I might show up to an argument or a conflict or something like that, bringing something to the table that I saw in an argument or a conflict 2 years ago on the 2nd of August at 12 p.m. And I will go, okay, that is my kind of formula for how to navigate this situation. So I will recreate that now in this situation. And then my wife will point out in one way or another that she's very good at it, actually, by the way, that I've misinterpreted it or that I've not really understood, or that the words that I'm using in context with the situation like don't really match up. Like an example being, what is the difference between boundary setting and ultimatums? So I know it's a really toxic thing in a relationship to go, if this doesn't happen, I'm going to leave. So okay, that's a toxic thing, right? I know that's unhelpful. But my mind goes, how is that different from saying, if you speak to me this way, or with this tone, or if you say these things, or if you do this, I'm going to exit the conversation. I'm like, what is the difference? How do those two things work together? And I've had to develop this really deep intellectual understanding of like, my wife explained it to me. She was like, in that situation, when you're saying, this doesn't work for me, I don't like that tone, that phrase, whatever it is. If you speak to me like that, I'm going to exit the conversation. It's about exiting the conversation to gain clarity and emotional regulation to then reconnect again later and have a better shot at reconnecting later and doing it better later. Whereas saying, if this doesn't happen, I'm going to leave, it's more like there is no attempt to reconnect in that. It's like I'm out.
Yeah.
So
Consequence.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. My good friend of mine, Carly, she's late diagnosed autistic. We've had a lot of conversations. And one of the things she says when she talks about all these unspoken, like social rules and cues that neurotypical people almost seems to be innate, sometimes when she's calling them out, I see the absurdity of it. And so I'm guessing as well, like, because when I can step back and actually see it through her eyes, I'm like, that is kind of absurd. Like the subtlety and the nuance is absurd, really, when sometimes when you pull it apart. And she says sometimes that the autistic people are seen as the truth tellers. Like they're calling it out and going like, what is this bull? Like, why aren't we just being more direct here? Wouldn't that solve a whole load of misunderstandings if that was the case?
Yeah. And that's a very flattering way to put it. And
I've got some more from her.
that it is a very flattering way to put it. And if you put a group, this is one of the things that has made me really gain a bunch of clarity. A few of my clients who are autistic, when I started kind of going through this process, and I mentioned to them at the end of a couple of sessions, I was like, oh, by the way, my doctor actually sent me for a diagnosis. And they're like, you didn't know? Like they're looking at me like I could have told you that. Like, you know, and if you put a bunch of autistic people in a room, we will agree on these things and we will point these things out. A lot of autistic people make great comedians because they're able to point out the absurdity of like some things and how crazy navigating some of these social faux pas is. Like, whenever I go outside, for example, I wear a hat pulled low over my eyes or sunglasses every single time because trying to figure out what the correct amount of eye contact to give the person walking towards me in the other direction on the street is a nightmare. Like for me trying to decide like, do I look do I acknowledge, do I look at their face or do I stay looking at the ground? Is that weird or is that not weird? Like, and if we do catch eyes, how how long am I meant to hold that for? Because too long is creepy. I know that for sure. But then if you don't acknowledge someone when they're acknowledging you, like that's also a bit weird. This is in my head
Mhm.
all the time.
It's exhausting.
Well, I know one of the traits of autism is dichotomous thinking, they call it, isn't it? I think that's the language. So, which, again, this is all the things that I've been learning as well, which is not as simple as they see it as this or this. So, my friend Carly, because she's same process, exactly what you're describing, this is exactly what she describes to me. It actually means that when she's looking at a situation, she's not going, is it this or is it this? She's like, is it this or is it one of these other 99 possibilities?
Yes.
So it's like there's a massive nuance and scale in that, but it doesn't have the feeling of nuance. So actually, she can see things in more angles than most neurotypical people who are not, just blundering through, not really paying attention. So her capacity for nuance, and at the same time, the challenge she has without landing on the actual play. Like I see that conflict in her arise time and again.
Mm.
It also though brings up the question of like the intersection of where anxiety would be with this, because there's also the it's almost like what you're describing is like, you have an awareness of all of these questions and all of these like, do I go this way, that way, this way, that? And that itself creates like I want to do the right thing. I want to blend in, or I don't want to make the wrong move. Versus like, I don't care. Like I'm just do what I'm gonna do. And that with the absence of the anxiety, like how that might even show up differently. But I think the anxiety would be the compounding awareness that this is going on, and that like how do I meet the world? Like there's a reason we call it neurotypical, right? It's like typically this is what everyone else is doing. If everyone else was thinking like I'm, then there's no anxiety to navigate. But because I feel like other, or because I feel like I'm not doing something right, now I've got this anxiety on top of it, which is why I think probably there's so much comorbidity, and maybe even with intrusive thoughts and OCD and things like that. I don't know if it's part of that because of this dynamic or because it's just implicitly part of it. But it seems like it's such an invitation for so many other mental processes to go on just to navigate the original, which is, I think, what you said when I
Yeah,
originally asked the question of the difference.
100%. When you think in a way that is different to the vast majority of people, we're always told, oh, it's different, it's not wrong. But when you think in a way that is different, you get treated like it's wrong. And it only requires a certain number of times of being treated like you're crazy for you to start building that anxiety and really going to town on your thoughts and thinking, okay, how do I come correct in this situation? How do I mask? What do I need to do?
Yeah.
The other difference that I was thinking about with anxiety is with anxiety, it's like sometimes you're having this experience in this situation, but another time, actually, if you're feeling quite calm and grounded, you're going to have a different process in that situation. Whereas autism is going to be a consistent, right?
Yes. The only time I feel completely at peace is when I'm alone.
Mm.
And
With your dog, not totally alone.
with the dog.
Yeah.
Oh, no, he's a lot of work. So he's a Belgian Malinois. So,
Okay.
he's like,
A different
he,
thing.
he's a he's a beautiful boy and I love him very much. He's very, very cuddly, but he's also like an energy ball. So it depends on where he's at. But yeah, and this is again, it's been really challenging in my marriage as well. And my wife is exceptionally understanding. Like, obviously, I can relax around my wife because she sees me, she understands this. She's a coach, a very great relationship coach as well. So she really gets neurodivergence. She actually has ADHD, so she's able to see what's going on, and I can relax around her. I don't need to mask around her as much.
Hmm.
But when what you said, Sarah, like, it's you get breaks from it or you don't, like, yeah, you don't get a break from this. It actually made me think of this ridiculous TV show that used to be about like a ghost, a werewolf, and a vampire, like sharing a flat somewhere in the UK. And the werewolf was actually having a bear with me. The werewolf was having a conversation with someone about the vampire at one point, saying like, I experience what I experience like once a month. Once a month I turn into this wolf and I have to contain it like once a month, whatever. He points to the vampire and he's like, he doesn't get a rest from this. He is always, always, every moment of every day navigating that experience. And I felt so seen.
So how, if at all, does this overlap or intersect with food and body image for you?
One big part of it is that a lot of behaviors that are labeled as eating disorder behaviors are quite normal for people on the neurodivergent kind of autism end of the spectrum. We love routine. We don't like change a whole lot. We like, again, this is generalizing, it's not all of us, but with food, for example, I can eat the same thing day in, day out for a very, very long time. I take a lot of peace and security in routines. I don't necessarily seek a lot of new stimulus. Like, I've liked the same three things ever since I was a tiny kid.
Food wise?
Um, oh, yeah, food wise, but as well, like just interests and
Oh,
that kind of thing. Like,
Okay.
I'm focused in a particular area. Like with my wife, for example, she will want to go different places and do different things and try different food and everything. And when she asked me, so where do you want to go? I have to really be mindful of my responses, because if I was not masking or if I was not mindful, I would just say the same place we went to last weekend, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Can I
Like,
ask a question in your mind? Because I think that's really interesting what you just said there, because masking comes up a lot in these conversations. What the difference is between masking and being mindful in your mind?
I think masking is pretending,
Mm-hmm.
being mindful is a more compassionate experience. I
Yeah.
think in my marriage, I would say that I'm mindful. Like, I know that my wife likes a lot more diversity than me in our experiences, in our food, in all that kind of stuff. So I'm mindful of her preferences while still being myself.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Masking is like I'm masking myself. Like, I'm having conversations in a way that I know please the person that I'm
hmm.
speaking to.
Have you written about that? Is that like something talked about in I've never heard of this distinction between mindful and
I think he's the
masking.
first one to make it.
I really like
That
it.
was
You wanna put that
It's a
out there.
really nice nuance.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Well, yeah, that's just literally on the spot. That's my
Okay.
that's how I've had
TM
to
it.
come to understand it. TM, yeah. Mindful versus masking. Yeah. Mindful is a compassionate decision that you make while still showing up as yourself. Masking is when you are showing a manufactured version of yourself. An autistic friend of mine said that he has apps that he opens. Like, if he goes to the pub and is surrounded by lads who like football, he'll open the I'm at the pub surrounded by guys who like football app. If he's at home with his elderly mother and sister, he'll open the I'm at home with my
Just
elderly mother.
realized you meant metaphorically. I
Yeah.
was taking
It took me a
literally for
minute
a
to
Okay.
second.
So yeah,
like
so
there's an app called that.
Yeah, I was
no,
like, what? Huh?
so
He's
sorry,
writing
yeah.
them?
So yeah,
Now
like
he's taking it literally.
in these internal apps. Also, like, this gentleman's gay as well, so he'll be one version of himself with his friends, like watching the football, and then he'll go to like a gay bar, like with his other friends, and show up as like a different version of himself. And again, it's so difficult because it's very easy to say, okay, well, gay men have been doing that since
Mm.
the beginning of time. But the way he described it to me, the mechanism of how it works, how he understands it, and everything like that, I looked at him and was like, yeah, like that's
Do you think there's Liv was on the podcast. Liv, what's her last name?
Well, it's
It was
Sarah.
Sarah, but that's her
Sarah,
middle name. I don't think she has a.
isn't it
Well,
Sarah?
I'll just
Sarah.
say,
I can't. Oh, gosh, what is it?
I don't think she talks. I don't think she says it. It's just Liv Label Free. But Liv
oh
from
yeah,
Liv Label
yeah,
Free was on the podcast and spoke similarly about the overlap of neurodivergent and autistic just safety mechanisms, versus eating disorder behaviors. And I also am wondering, like, in the more recent past 5 years onslaught of eating disorder recovery content on social media, has there been also an anxiety created around, like, I'm doing eating disorder recovery wrong because now you got to mask the fact that you like routine and you like your safe foods and you like to have this consistency and even like counting of calories and things like that, because it's not in cahoots with eating disorder recovery and in fact is seen as like an affront to it, right? So how do you personally, or how have you reconciled the distinction?
a lot of people have come to me trying to navigate that. A lot of the people who show up to work with me are often people who haven't really fit the mold in like recovery programs or other programs. And a lot of them do like routine. A lot of them do still calorie count a little bit. And it it really is a difficult task that requires a lot of self-awareness, uh,
Mm.
separating, right, what is a preference versus what is ED.
How do you know? How do you personally tell?
I ask a lot of questions. Um, Often it comes down to the feeling that you have while you're executing the thing,
Mm.
sometimes on a very somatic level, which is sometimes very difficult for people with ASD because we don't naturally connect to the somatic experience. That requires a bit more practice. But it comes down to things that we've spoken about very much before. I know you guys talk about the intention, like the same action can be performed by two different people with a different intention. And it's not really the action that is the self-limiting factor, it's the intention.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that felt difference again, which is so hard to
Yep.
articulate in words. We were trying to do that in our last recording, or I
So
was.
hard. Yeah.
How would you articulate the intention then when it's more of an autistic trait versus an eating disorder behavior? Because eating disorder behavior, could you give examples of the intention for each just for the listener to be able to make the difference clear in their own minds?
When I make a choice that some people would interpret as an eating disorder behavior, there are zero parts of me that are wishing I was making a different choice. And I think that is a huge difference because when I remember the 15 years I spent with anorexia, bulimia, then into binge eating disorder, I would be making a food choice while part of me would be fantasizing about the thing that I wished that I was eating or that I wished that I
Mm.
was allowed to eat. Whereas these days, I make some pretty freaking bland food choices and I eat the same thing for breakfast all the time. But no part of me is doing that longing for something else. And I think that's a really key part of the difference. It still requires some self awareness, though, because I know that there are certain moments during the ED journey where, you're going to make a choice and you're like, yes, this is correct. I feel good. I want that. Like, there can be a lot of conviction
Yeah.
behind it. There is a degree of peace in the
Mm.
decisions that I make now that some people might still label as, oh, that looks like ED. I'm like, there is literally nothing going on behind the curtains with this decision. It is simply that I don't hate this food. It's very convenient for me to make right now. I've got bigger fish to fry today, and this
Mm.
is not going to affect me emotionally in any way whatsoever. This is just a thing that I'm doing so that I'm not hungry in 2 hours.
Mm.
That's helpful, I think, that self talk piece, because that's a different feeling. Even just hearing you say it, then I would imagine I have some clients with anorexia who I think that's a place that is one of the disorders where the overlap of like, no, this is what I want. There isn't another part of me that wants something else. I'm very
Yeah.
connected and identified with this food as
Mm.
safety, which is going to feel very similar.
Yeah.
But what you just described isn't that. It's more pragmatic than identified.
Pragmatic is the word. I'm like pathologically pragmatic,
Mm.
but at the same time, I feel emotion like spears through the chest. The visceral experience of emotion for me feels exhausting, both ends of the emotional scale. It took my wife a long time to understand why I was not expressing joy the same way as her. It's like my ideal situation is to be right in the middle of the emotional spectrum and to be content and peaceful because it's not like I don't enjoy experiencing joy and other things, but very elevated emotion, despite the fact that it's enjoyable, I'll be exhausted afterwards. And difficult emotions on the other end, I heard someone say that people with autism who are dealing with it relatively well, they've developed an extreme distress tolerance, like a saltwater fish that's just been thrown into fresh water and just told to deal with it. There is like this degree of discomfort that exists pretty much constantly. And some of these normal human emotions that come up, I can navigate them and I don't make self-limiting decisions in the presence of them. But doing that is exhausting, like viscerally exhausting.
Can you describe how you navigate them? Like if you were to try and explain what it is that you're doing to get through them, if that's the right words.
I hope you're ready because this is like my favorite topic on earth.
Oh, great.
I'm like there's so much different stuff to explore with resilience, eating disorder recovery, and just everything like that. But through my work with eating disorder recovery, I've literally found the thing that I'm more passionate about than anything else. And it's a subject within a subject. And that is, how do we deal with distress in peak moments of emotional flooding? Like we all can sit here and have smart conversations about what we should do. We can all talk about making values aligned choices, and we can journal about our values, and we can say, oh, in this situation I'm going to do this and whatever, and everyone has a plan until the shit hits the fan. And it's that moment in time that has always fascinated me. Like, what do you do in that moment when you're emotionally flooded, your thoughts no longer are in alignment with what we could call the most clear version of you? Like, what do you do in that moment? And a big part of it for me is learning to recognize when that's happening, to go, all right, I'm not thinking as myself anymore. Like, these thoughts that I'm having, they're not really me. This is not the version of me that does my best thinking. To stop believing my thoughts at that stage. And that can sound very gaslighty at times, but it's like recognizing, no, I've shifted gears physiologically and psychologically into what we can call like emotional flooding. I'm no longer thinking of myself. I can't trust my logic right now. So to take my attention from my thoughts into the visceral experience of the very difficult emotion. And that's hard because sometimes you do that and you go there. And Steph, I know you do so much really great work like with this somatic stuff that, you take your experience to the visceral side of the emotion, and there might be so much discomfort there. Like there, you might find pain, you might find physical shaking. Like sometimes when I try to have a conversation with my wife that involves like stating needs or like boundary setting or like any of the healthy stuff that all couples need to be able to do, she'll tell that I'm about to come to her with something like that because my hands will be shaking. Like, and so it's about bringing myself into the physical discomfort, getting out of my head, bringing myself into the physical discomfort, and practicing regulating physically in that moment, not trying to outthink it, not like actively noticing urgency. I know, Steph, you and I talked about this on an episode of Strong Not Starving once, like recognizing urgency as a huge red flag. I need to say this right now. I need to explain this right now. I need to be understood right now. No, you don't. No, 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 really, you don't. And this is the conversations that I have with myself. Right now, you need to write it out. You need to wait. And that's how I deal with it, essentially.
It's just reminding me of something similar recently. I think I have a similar process. I made a very impulsive decision. Every now and again, I make a very big impulsive decision. Like the last one was probably when I gave up my tenancy and was like, I'm just going to nomad for 6 months. I'm going to go to India for a month. And like all of those experiences were difficult and not really any of them were what I hoped they would be. But I feel like I've done that all my life, had these moments of these really impulsive decisions. And I did one recently a couple of weeks ago, which may cost me several £1,000s down the toilet with nothing to show for because of this impulsive decision I made, booking a trip that I'm probably not going to be able to take. And I remember like this feeling that came over me because between thinking about spending this kind of money and spending it was about 20 minutes. I wouldn't even give myself a day to think about it because I was just in this impulsive mode. And afterwards, when I realized kind of what I'd done, I fell into this. It was such a familiar old feeling of frustration with myself because I got overexcited. Like, I got overexcited. I want to do this thing. There was a little voice in my head saying, why don't you think about this for a day? And it's like, no, because I don't want to change my mind. I don't want to think about it. Rejected, rejected. But I don't even know what the emotion was, but it was like this whole feeling. I felt like I was like, I don't know. I felt like I was a kid again and I make stupid choices and all of this. I was just right in it. And then there was a part of me that could see this and go, oh, this is really old. Like you've had this feeling before. It's not a common one, but this is an old thing and it's revisiting. So all the things you're telling yourself now may not be about now. And then when I introduce that doubt, it's like, okay, I can kind of tolerate these feelings because I'm kind of going to wait, little ways like wait and like just see how they pass. And if in a couple of days when I'm feeling calmer, I still want to think I'm a complete idiot, then that's fine. But right in this moment, I'm not going to draw any conclusions about myself. Because I found the only way for me, and I think because my nervous system doesn't tend to go like overactive, the feelings are uncomfortable. But if I can make my mind safe, I'm almost always okay in here, even if it's uncomfortable, even if I just have to kind of crash or whatever it takes until it passes. But I think it's such an important piece, the being able to doubt, because for me, the beliefs are more painful, more uncomfortable than the physical sensations. But I'm interested in kind of for you, Steph, because I know you've talked about you can doubt what you think, and actually, like, the nervous system isn't really reacting or shifting in response to that.
Well, the nervous system is louder. And it's interesting even listening to this conversation because it's so highlight like Marcus, I'm with you on that response. Like that's how I experience and my way of navigating, especially with body image, that's where that would be the biggest, has been exactly this trajectory. I call it going underwater with it because it feels like my nervous system is like a wave that's so big that it doesn't matter. It's like literally being a wave crashing over. It's like what you're thinking about strategizing your way through the water isn't relevant. It's like, I gotta, like it's just now. And that is what I have to regulate first. And working with other clients who don't have such a loud nervous system, I have had to really understand that not everybody is like that, and that some people really appreciate a tool or a belief or journaling or like an affirmation. And I've had to be like, well, how can you even do that yet? Like I'm just like, no. Like that's your thoughts aren't ready for that. And I'm like, no, some people's are. Like some people aren't leading with their nervous system. And maybe, I mean, I've not had a diagnosis of neurodivergence. I have anxiety. I've had neurodivergent clients tell me they suspect I have neurodivergence, to your point earlier. But there's something about where your nervous system is very loud. It almost can be used as an asset to hear. It's such a fierce communicator that you have to figure out how to navigate that like flooding, because if you don't, this is where I was my whole life with like, okay, I'm gonna make a plan and I'm gonna diet and I'm gonna do this, and I would get myself into so much trouble trying to stay in my head where it was complete dysregulation and chaos, but I didn't have any other alternatives. And so learning to respect whatever's happening in the body here, which I also want to ask you a follow-up question about, has been actually a way of actually coping with this in a much more regulated way, because I'm dysregulated 100%, got to get out of here first before anything else is going to happen. This is the path. This is all you're responsible for. Forget the rest. Stop putting that burden on yourself. And as long as I know that, there's something in that helps me like hold on for a little while until I can return. But I'm curious about what you said. You said like for as much as sometimes it's hard to hear the cues, that there's times where emotions can be felt so viscerally. And what do you think that's about in terms of do you struggle with interoception when you're not in a flood? Like so fullness cues, hunger cues, more mild communication systems from your nervous system, like feel more low level feelings. Do you feel those? Or is it like it's either 0 or 100? Like, how does that experience feel to you?
I've had to learn to tune into them. And I've had to learn that very, very intentionally, because unless I'm actually stopping and being mindful, to use like an overused word, but like unless I'm actively practicing mindfulness, it's like my body is just along for the ride and I'm not tuned in to any of that. So I've had to actively practice this and learn it and create the connection, because it's, unless I'm doing that intentionally, it's not there.
Okay. Do you get full? Do you feel fullness?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. I struggled with that when I was having issues with binge eating. I didn't feel fullness unless I was like, binging. But after time and practice, I now feel satiated and
Yeah.
all these different things.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Same. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been through the gamut of eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, binge eating. You've got like the full house. Um,
So fun.
yeah, I know, what fun. Look how rich your experience is. I'm curious about your recovery. And so when you look back now in your recovery process, because when you were recovering, you weren't aware of being neurodivergent. You weren't aware of this. It wasn't in your landscape. So when you look back on your recovery now, how do you think your autistic process like helped and hindered? Helped or hindered? Like, are there times where you think actually being autistic was really helpful in this aspect, but over here it presented more challenges?
Being autistic was helpful in the sense that once I had a decent intellectual understanding of something, I could action it with a lot of conviction very quickly and very consistently. So, again, whether that's it has shades of autism, but it's not exclusively an autistic trait, but the autistic style of like, I understand this, that makes sense to me, that makes me safe, I'm going to do it. I get a lot of safety from very, very thorough intellectual understandings of things because if I understand something on like a level of detail that irritates most people,
Is it
then
exhausting when you're going to those levels of understanding, or are you energized by getting into that?
it's exhausting for the people around me. Like I had this maths teacher at school. I struggled with confidence a lot at school. I didn't realize at the time, obviously, because I was a child and a teenager, but I had a very, very high IQ while also being incredibly full of like self-doubt and insecurity and everything like that. So I would look at other kids who would seemingly be learning things faster than me and thinking, oh my God, I'm so dumb. But the pace at which I would learn was slowed right down because for me to put up my hand and say, yes, I understand this now, would require me to understand it in the most three-dimensional ways that a lot of people weren't requiring that level of certainty around their understanding before they'd be willing to go, yeah, I get this. So I had this maths teacher and I was accelerated into very advanced mathematics when I was in high school, and in the 10th grade I was doing maths. It was like a couple of years ahead of me, but because I required that just exceptionally thorough understanding of things to the point where I'm like, I'm not willing to say I understand unless I really understand, like unless I could do this in my sleep. This teacher actually pulled my parents aside and said, Marcus learns differently. Like there's something like he spotted this, but this was like 2004. So, but it is exhausting seeking that degree of understanding from things sometimes, and it slows me down a lot. But then when I do get something and really understand it, I have a lot of conviction behind it. And this is one of the reasons I love coaching so much. And it's
Mm.
such a good fit for me because before I give myself permission to coach something, I have to understand it so incredibly well that there's no question a person can ask me that I won't be able to guide them through. And also, in a coaching dynamic, it is like one of the very rare situations where it's socially acceptable to ask a lot of questions, to get a really detailed understanding of things, and to have very, very deep conversations. So, again, bringing it back to recovery, sorry to get a little bit off track, but how that applied to then recovery, I was retrofitting a lot of concepts that I understood from other areas of my life into the recovery process when I realized that I could retrofit these skills. And
Like,
like dealing with when I was a pro guitar player in my 20s and playing some really high pressure shows, I was punching well above my weight and I was terrified going on stage, like in arenas and like really big stages, terrified. So I had to go to a psychologist to learn how to deal with stage fright. But that was actually my introduction into understanding how to navigate emotional flooding. So I used to be so scared going on stage that my hands would shake, my knees would shake, I would forget how to play, and that doesn't really go down too well in front of like big audiences. So I had to get that under control. And when I realized that okay, that skill I could then retrofit to navigating binge eating urges and navigating big feelings around food and body image, it's like, okay, cool. I already know this. I can bring it from there over to here. And that was helpful.
Yeah. It's like Tetris pieces. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any challenges, do you think, that made the process harder?
It was very difficult to change my mind about things. I had an understanding of what I thought brought me value as a human being, an understanding of what I thought made me safe, what I thought made me worthy. And it was very, very difficult to convince myself otherwise. Like the whole allowing some weight fluctuation and not keeping myself as lean as possible and all this kind of stuff, that was nothing but a huge leap of faith for me. I was just like, I'm uncomfortable with it. I'm not going to be comfortable with it, but this clearly isn't working out for me, so I've got to do it anyway. And yeah, it wasn't like I accepted, like body acceptance and everything. It was like, woo, yeah, like I feel better now. No, no, I was pushing shit uphill with a pointed stick the entire way.
Mm.
But yet, in how you describe autistic people having a lot of discomfort, like life can feel pretty uncomfortable, social situations, navigating all kinds of things can feel pretty uncomfortable. I guess when you're feeling discomfort, your brain isn't immediately going, oh, I have to alleviate this discomfort straight away because you've been in many situations where you just can't. So maybe there's almost a skill in accepting discomfort. Whereas I think I'm perhaps somebody who may be more drawn to like, oh no, I feel uncomfortable. I definitely had to learn this. Oh, I feel uncomfortable. That means something's wrong. So I need to do something immediately to feel better. Oh, I know, I'll binge and then I'll feel better for a bit.
Yeah.
I've had to really work on that, exactly that,
Mm-hmm.
with my awareness around coaching. It's been a really steep learning curve for me, realizing that not everyone is quite as habituated to perpetual discomfort as I am. And I have to really come correct. And I'm not saying that is, oh, look how much discomfort I can like endure. No, I don't think that's a badge of honor. I think it's something that like I've had to become really aware around what I'm asking of my clients. I've had to let them very much set the bar for how much discomfort they're willing to step into at different stages of the journey and not be too dogmatic based on my own experience. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Well, I'm going to speak on behalf of Steph as well. Honored that you have come on our
Yeah.
podcast and that we're the first. We're the
Yes,
first
the
to hear
first.
about this outside of that. And I know, especially at the beginning, you felt really uncomfortable. I was bringing up a lot talking about this. You seemed more and more at ease, I guess, as time went on. How are you feeling at the end of this conversation, as we're coming to the end of this conversation?
Still nervous, but Sarah, I want to thank you for, the encouragement you gave me a few months ago now. Like you were one of the people who, I mentioned this to kind of in passing in a Instagram DMs kind of conversation, and you kind of encouraged me to go, you know what, if you identify with that, if that's something that if that's a thread that needs pulling on, then, go for it. And that really meant a lot
Mm.
to me. It was really helpful just to have that little bit of a nudge and that little bit of encouragement. So thank you for
Mm-hmm.
that.
Well, you're so welcome. I think as well, when there's mainstream messages, a sense of like, oh, people jumping on the bandwagon or it's all of those kind of things. I think at the individual level, people are much kinder than we give them credit for. There's
Yeah,
these sort of sways of cultural opinion that we hear around the ether, and it feels like that's everybody. And actually, the reality often turns out to be different. I found anyway, but
I
yeah.
think that's true. Yeah, it's
Across the board.
Mm.
yeah, really easy to think, oh, society in general or people in general, but when you're talking to people as individuals, most
Yeah.
people are pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think individuals are very different than culture. Like even though culture is greater than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm. But if
True.
people want to work with you, or just because you've got an amazing podcast, I think Steph and I we've been on together and individually. I think maybe
Mm.
not sure. I think so.
Yeah.
It all merges into like where are we talking when? Marcus's podcast and on Instagram. You're strong, not starving. That's right.
Yeah. Strong
Yeah,
Not Starving podcast on Apple and Spotify and Strong Not Starving on Instagram. Yeah, that's the best place to find me.
yeah. Do you got anything specific you want to plug? I mean, anything that you're offering at the moment? It's okay if not, and I'll just cut that out. But if you want to,
No, like I find I've been trying to make like incarnations of different courses and products and everything for a very, very long time, and I still find that it's hard to replicate the experience that people get when they come and speak to me one to one. Like, in my head, I've got this idea of like niching right down, and rather than talking about nutrition and everything in the whole, talking about like a course on just overcoming emotional flooding, like literally just that part of the puzzle. This is what to do when the shit hits the fan. I'm looking at putting something together about that particular part because I love that topic. But yeah, that's still a while away. So right now it's just the one-to-one work.
okay. But look out for that, folks.
Yeah, it'll be there. It'll
Yeah.
be there.
Okay.
Thank you, Marcus. It's so good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. Like
It's awesome
face
to
to
see.
face.
It's awesome to see you too, Steph. And Sarah, like again, thank you for the part you played in this journey. And I'd love to have you guys on I'd love to have you guys on Strong Not Starving to talk about the new platform, like the new
Yeah,
podcast
happily.
that you're putting out. Like that would be amazing. Like when I heard you announce that, I was so stoked.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. If you want to come and guest spot and talk about that, I'm sure the
Yes.
people who listen to Strong Not Starving would love
Definitely.
that podcast.
Yes. And for anyone listening to this podcast, if you haven't checked out our Feelings and Other Inconveniences podcast, why not?
Why not?
Why,
A
why
flooding would
haven't
be a
you?
great episode, actually. We'll
Flooding
talk.
would be a
We'll
good
chat.
episode. Yeah.
It's
Okay.
that's still it's the best podcast title I've ever heard. Feelings and Other Inconveniences.
Thanks.
Thanks.
We'll stop recording before we
Just
go
gonna
on
end
to
it. That's it.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Bye,
yeah,
everybody.
Yeah, later.
yeah.